President Trump's war on Amazon and the Washington Post shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. But what is his goal here? What's the end game? And why is he attacking one of America's most successful companies? Let's discuss now with someone who has lived through Trump Twitter tirades. Joining me now, senior political commentator Joe Lockhart, the former chief communications officer for the NFL. Welcome. And senior political commentator Margaret Hoover, a former White House staffer for George W. Bush. Welcome as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. She's been here before. You're a newbie, Joe, so thank you so much. We're going to start with you. President Trump has attacked Amazon by name 15 times since taking office, and he was at it again this morning, accusing the Washington Post of being their chief lobbyist. And here's what he wrote. He said, the fake news Washington Post, Amazon's chief lobbyist, has another of many phony headlines. Trump defiant as China adds trade penalties. Wrong. Should read Trump defiant as U.S. adds trade penalties. Will end barriers in massive IP theft, typically bad reporting. So what do you think ultimately is behind the attacks on Amazon? Is it the Washington Post coverage? Is he jealous of Bezos' wealth, or something else?
I think it's a combination. I think the most obvious thing, and the thing that gets under his skin most often, is the Washington Post coverage. And this is the way bullies go after people that don't agree with them or criticize them. But I think it's interesting. It gives you some insight into his mind. I think some of it is some sort of envy that Bezos is the richest guy in the world and that he's not, because he's always trying to aggrandize his own wealth. And I think there's also the possibility that he's a developer, he's a builder. The people who hate e-commerce more than anyone are builders, because it devalues what they build. Retail space is worth less. His buildings are worth less. So you see this on a lot of issues. These sort of grudges that he's carried around for his adult life, he's brought to the White House, and now uses his power, which is an abuse of power, to try to settle these scores.
Yeah. So, Margaret, it is very disorienting to see a sitting Republican president repeatedly attack one of America's most successful companies. I mean, Amazon employs 500,000 people. This seems to fly in the face of Republican dogma.
Republican dogma. I mean, what's extraordinary. Every dogma. I mean, and the idea of a sitting president singling out a company and singling out a CEO of a company and consistently attacking them. By the way, there's a real effect of that. I mean, Amazon stocks are down today.
Right.
That has a real effect on the market. And Amazon, I think, frankly, the bully pulpit of the presidency is the most powerful sort of media platform anybody has. I mean, Donald Trump should be reminded of that. That can have a real effect on jobs, on livelihoods.
It is having a real effect on people's 401ks.
Yeah,
retirement.
Amazon's going to need to be really thoughtful and strategic about how to respond, and I think they're going to have to do something without, by the way, appearing to get into a fist fight with the president, because that's not helpful either.
Yeah. Joe, I want to talk about this with you, because you're the former PR chief for the NFL.
Right.
You were on the receiving end of Trump's attacks when he came after the NFL players for kneeling in protest of racial injustice during the national anthem. What was that experience like? What do you think Jeff Bezos is going through right now? What advice would you offer him, considering what Margaret just said? He's going to have to be strategic in the way he responds or the company responds.
Yeah, I think the difference here is he's going after a company. He's going after Bezos. Bezos is a big boy. He can take presidential criticism, and he's got $100 billion in the bank, and that'll help him through this difficult time. I think the difference with the NFL was the president was going after the entire workforce of the NFL, the players, the guys who go out on the field. And it was, at best it was racially insensitive. At worst it was, something worse. So I think for the NFL's, from the NFL's perspective, we really had to, stand up and say that it was wrong. We did that, but then we let him tweet away because what he wants is a fist fight in the schoolyard. And I think over time, that kind of behavior, the public catches on to. So I don't think the people at Amazon need to get into it on a daily basis with the president. I think they've handled it pretty well.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, though, if it's, when you have, in these tough times when everyone is so politically polarized, is it tough, not chasing away, some of the NFL fans or some of Amazon's customers when you have to criticize the president or respond to
Well, I mean, the difference is if you're the NFL, you're Amazon, you're trying to appeal to 100% of the country. Donald Trump's trying to appeal to about 35 to 40% of the country. And if he gets to 47, 48, he wins re-election and the game's over. But I think the interesting part is, and it goes back to this sort of, the kind of the grudge that he keeps holding. Going after the NFL wasn't by accident. He sued the NFL and tried to get into the NFL owners clubs in the 80s and lost. He tried to buy a club, 4 or 5 years ago, the Buffalo Bills, and there was just no chance that the owners were going to let him in to that organization. And this was, he carried that grudge, and he uses the Oval Office and Twitter in particular to try to litigate or get even with people,
as a cudgel.
which is just it is abuse of power. At its base.
Well, Margaret, in the past few weeks, he has been really, sort of erratically acting out on Twitter and saying things that are just factually inaccurate. He's had so many people leave. He lost Hope Hicks. He lost his bagman, John McAtee. I'm just wondering, Rob Porter is gone. Do you think there's something to do with what we're seeing?
Look, I think the circle that advises the president necessarily over time becomes smaller and becomes more insular. Every now and then you get a sort of a refresh. Somebody new comes in, it brings sort of fresh blood to it, and he's probably ripe for that, especially since so many of the inner circle that he had trusted and that he relied on as a sort of normal functioning have had some turnover. Yeah. Not just the ones that we know about, but the ones that are really helping him get through the day.
Can I ask you this? We're out of time, but why aren't more Republicans speaking out against someone who is directly, a sitting president directly affecting the markets and companies and people's livelihoods?
It is fundamentally shocking to me as a Republican who has identified with the modern American conservative movement since I have had a political sensibility. We have always been the market of the party of free trade. We have always been the party that has stood for freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, and to see the number of governors, frankly, even whose tariff war hurts their states and hurt their economies, be so afraid to criticize the president's policies. Yeah. Forget it doesn't have to be personal, just to criticize the substance of the policy. This man is such a bully that he doesn't give anybody room to disagree with him.
Thank you both. Fascinating conversation. I appreciate it. When we come back, just when you think the Trump cabinet's behavior can't get any worse, well, it does. What happened to drain that swamp?